Hey everyone, welcome to our XR happy hours. I'm looking forward to helping you guys out. If you have any XR development related questions or really any XR question, hoping to get into a nice conversation with y'all. And in the meantime, we're going to have some fun doing some Unity dev as well. As a bit of an intro for myself, my name is Ozzy. I'll be your instructor today. I have over, I think, 14 years of Unity dev experience at this point, about 6 to 8 years of teaching experience. My memory is pretty shoddy. I'm giving you some decent ranges there, I guess. And I went to the University of Calgary for electrical and software engineering. And I like playing the drums. As you can see, my little music studio over there. Drums, piano, guitar, all that stuff. But anyone in the chat, where are you guys from? I'm in Calgary, Canada right now. But yeah, where are you guys from? What's your skill level for Unity, C#, and XR Dev? Do you guys have any hardware? I've got the Oculus Quest here with me. I've got the Quest 2 and HTC Vive Pro and the regular one as well. But yeah, until I'm not sure if I can see the thing there. There we go. Hey, Beatrice in the house. Hey, Beatrice, it's been a while. How are you doing? Oh, it's great to see you again. I'm curious to see how your AR app has been doing. Beatrice is one of our old students, actually. She did a great job on bringing her app idea to life. It's super fun to see that that progress that it had. All right, let's pull up some stuff. Gothenburg, Sweden, game developer for mobile VR. Nice. All right, right on. And we got Brad here as well, Washington, D.C. area. Unity noob, okay, but very interested in the future of XR games and entertainment. All right, I like it. Game developers, right on. That's right up my alley. Well, let me show off my game. I think that'd be fun. Let me switch over to Riffs of Euphoria here. Wondering if I can pop this up here and share my screen. And let's see if I can get the audio in there as well. Oh, Carol from Missouri, USA. Some Unity and VR experience with the Quest 2. Okay, I like it. All right, let me see if I can pull up my screen here. And I'm just gonna. Oh, you know what? I might be just able to share the file as is. So I have some old ones, but let's see if I can pull up the trailer. The video has a unique codec. Okay, well, it won't let me share that one. Let's see if I can share the other one. All right, let's see here. Nope. Okay, I'll just share my screen. All right, here we go. Magic has returned. Can you guys hear that? How will you wield it? It's a tech demo I'm working on, or this is the tech demo of the project I'm working on. Gonna be a nice RPG. Turn up the volume a little bit there. But there you go. So that was the app I'm working on. Nice magic hand gestures. Well, thank you, Jonas. The idea is you have these 3 orbs to choose your spells with, and you choose kind of what element you want to mix together and cast a spell, or just one element or none. Does VR and Unity have a consistent set of gestures, or does it vary by game? Oh, it definitely varies a lot. But if you're talking about hand gestures, there's a few things that are kind of common when it comes to AR and VR. It would be like looking at your hand to bring up a menu, whether that it's, like this in the Oculus Quest, you pinch yourself, do the flower thing in the HoloLens, and trying to remember the other ones, but yeah, it's typically a menu is your hand towards yourself, and then interactions are often like this. Now, the reason this is very common is because you give yourself feedback, right? Because one of the things they're combating is, you're pressing buttons. You're trying to get the user to feel like they're pressing buttons instead of just, hitting the air. So HoloLens and other apps now at this point use the pinch command as a way to give the user some feedback as if they're pressing something. When can we play the demo? Dan, you're right. I got a lot of work ahead of me. Now, bear with me. The chat and the video is going to have a bit of a delay, so I'm going to be seeing your comments a bit later. But yeah, so with that in mind, I'll see if I can just pop into the VR part of it. All right, let's see if I can. Oh, there we go. Yo, thanks. You're welcome, Brad. Now, let's have some fun. Let's do a bit of dev for ourselves. Let's just create some interaction that you could bring into VR. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna. So let me gauge kind of what is the experience level for the people in chat, and then let's do something for fun that will kind of match the level of experience here. If we find that there's, people closer to 0, then I'll do something simple and fun in Unity, show that off and how to make it, or if we have more experienced people, step it up a bit. But yeah, on a scale 0 to 10, 0, you've never used Unity. 10, you are an expert master of it. You can drop in chat how experienced you are in Unity, and we can have some fun with it. Jacob says, were those particle colliders as the spells? In a way, those used more raycasting to figure out where to create that effect using VFX graph. Very powerful system for designing particles. So Beatrice coming in with the 6. Carol coming in with the 6. Beatrice coming in with the 1. We got Nora with the 4. All right. We got a bit of a range there. Made some old OVR, so Oculus VR prototypes in Unity. Nothing released yet, so maybe 3. Okay, so we're looking kind of intermediate. I think intermediate side of things. A few newbies. So you're selling yourself short. Oh yeah, Beatrice, you definitely are. All right. So let's have some fun. We'll make something together here. We'll share my screen. See, there we go. So we can see Unity. We'll start up a new scene, and I will share my mouse. But if at any point, guys, you have questions, let me know. I'll try to address those as that's my priority today. Okay, let's see. Let's cover something fun. Okay, So let's imagine we're trying to make some interaction in VR, and the interaction that's often very difficult to do, and I've determined a fairly simple way to implement it, is trying to make a dial. Now you can use physics to do that, and it, is unfortunately not the most realistic effect. It kind of jitters and stuff. But Simhas, can you make AR with video file or just with live camera? Can you? Oh, I see what you mean. You could use an AR video. You can send that for your application to process. That would be just kind of showing that to your AR camera, overriding that with what the texture the live camera is seeing. So that is possible. Yeah, that would take a little bit of a hacking of the thing, but it would you could do that. Yeah, it just depends though, because you could do that, I believe, in Vuforia. But it'd be tricky to do that with something like ARKit or ARCore because those rely on external sensors as well. Whereas Vuforia, you can get away with just an image, if that makes sense. Yeah, that would be tricky with AR Foundation. But so that actually, bringing that up, that reminds me. So Vuforia is one way of doing AR. AR Foundation is kind of an abstraction of the other ways of doing AR, such as AR Core and AR Kit. AR Core for Android, AR Kit for iOS. AR Foundation is an umbrella that abstracts and works for both. That needs a newer version of your devices because because of the fact that it relies on other sensors on your phones, those sensors aren't available on older phones. So Vuforia, however, which was made by Qualcomm, leased to PTC, and then owned by PTC, that software just uses basically what your camera sees. And then with that in mind, it's able to kind of not worry about those other sensors. And you can kind of do a lot with the images that you get with whatever your camera sees and whatnot. I wonder if I have Vuforia already in this project. If I do, I could quickly show off some AR stuff. I have AR Foundation in here, but I don't believe I put Vuforia in here. I know Beatrice definitely knows Vuforia. That was her large part of her project. Vuforia engine. Okay, yeah, let's quickly do a Vuforia project just for fun, and we'll switch into doing something else as well. Okay, so steps for making an AR project. You would go top here, go to Window, go down to Package Manager. Again, I'm using Unity 2019.4. I would go Window, Package Manager. I would search for this Vuforia Engine AR package, making sure the package manager you're in the Unity registry section. Once you have that selected, install it via your package manager. Do something a little bit more complicated after this, but I think I can show this off and look pretty good. Pretty fun. And what we're going to try and do is just augment an image target. But if you guys have any suggestions of things you want to cover, we can try and tackle those today. This is particularly slow for some reason. I'll give that a second. It's a bit late to cancel it. There we go. Okay, yeah, there we go. That's fine. So I've got Vuforia in my project. Once again, I just went Window, Package Manager, found Vuforia Engine. It takes a second to load your packages, but once you've got that, click on the install and we're good to go. Let's set up our scene. This is your Unity scene. Typically, you will see the default layout for Unity. Let me just switch over to the default so you see what I see when you launch Unity. There we go. So this is probably what you see when you load up Unity for the first time, except all these folders down here. So I've got Vuforia in my project. I'm going to go up to Game Object or right-click in here and select Vuforia Engine, bring in an AR camera. I already have a main camera in my scene, so I'm actually going to delete that. Got my AR camera. I'm going to right click in here, go down to Vuforia Engine, bring in an image into my scene. If I double click on that, you can see a zoom in on the actual image that Vuforia provides by default. Looking good. Can a VR application transition to an AR application? On a phone, you can do a lot of things. So you can definitely have a VR application on your phone while Vuforia is running in the back, and then switch over, or AR Foundation is running in the back, and you can switch over that way by simply removing whatever digital content is in the way. I've actually found that as a very interesting way to do an escape room app. So what I did was, when it was a AR Foundation app, you look around your environment, you choose where you want to spawn your room. And so when you click, I go to a nice empty space, tap my phone screen, plop down a digital room. And now with my phone, I'm looking around my room, but I'm actually seeing digital content, which is the world. So you can kind of transition that way. There is a example, I believe it was Project Ghost. Let me see if I can pull it up here. Project Ghost, that showed an example of VR and AR to kind of transitioning between the two. Seeing if I can find their demo here. So the Vive Pro has two cameras on the front, and so this particular project starts in AR. We'll see here in a moment. As you can see, she can see digital content and the real world, as you know what AR is, I'm sure. It's just the quality of these things aren't very good. But after this, you'll see a nice transition to VR. Obviously, you can go back to AR mode. So walk through the portal, bam, she's in VR now. So yeah, definitely feasible to switch between the two. Great question, Jacob. So now we have the image target. I'm just going to right click on the image target, go down to 3D object cube, got a cube. I'm going to make that a child. So if I click and drag this cube onto the image target, it becomes a child. So it's as if it's going to basically follow this image target wherever it goes. So I could go something like this, and let's just move it to the surface of this object. So let's say something like this. So now I'm just going to hit play. I'm going to pull up that. I think I might need to stop sharing my camera in the stream for a second. That is very cool indeed, Brad. Ah, you're welcome, Jacob. Let me pull up that image, because this is AR image detection. Let's see if I can pull up the Vuforia Astronaut. That is the default image they provide you with for you to get started testing this stuff out. It'll take a second to get into play mode, but I think I'll need to temporarily stop my cam here. There we go. Okay, it's using the wrong camera. Let me find where that one is. 1 second. All right, there we go. Let's take a look at this image. And you can see how it is already augmenting some digital content. Sorry for the poor quality of this particular camera. But there we go. Forgot I had a second one plugged in. It's always nice. But yeah, that's how quickly you can, for all the Unity noobs, that's how quickly you can make a functional AR scene. But with that said, let's do something a little bit more tricky. We'll make a fun little dial. We'll learn some stuff about Unity's functions like quaternion.look rotation. I don't know, I just love that function so much. Okay, so if we wanted to make a dial, let's say we wanted it such that the player is touching a dial and the player moves their hand around, the dial turns to face the player as well. So a few different ways to do that. You can do hard-coded math, of course, but try and do that differently. Say what? Say what fast 3 times. Okay, let's go to a new scene. I won't bother saving that one. And I'm just going to quickly create a folder for our XR happy hours. But quaternion rotation. It's quaternion look rotation, quaternion look rotation, quaternion look rotation. There you go, Dayon. 4 times, yeah. You gotta get that XYZW in there. Okay. So I'm gonna quickly create a area for our dial. Let's go with something like that. And our dial, I will create a cylinder. Make that about this size here. Let's just bring that up. That is rather large. Go. There is our dial. I'm just going to create a couple materials to make it look different. And let's go with black as well. You know what? Let's address the black on here and the red on there. And red. There we go. I'm going to create a little ticker for letting us know what is considered forward direction, which would be the blue arrow. That's what's considered forward. I'm going to right click and create a little cube here as well. Make that a child of the cylinder. Reposition the cube here. Let's put it here. Make it much smaller, like so. Let's bring that in, kind of like that. A little bit bigger than that. There we go. Okay, so got some ticker that lets me know, some little tick that lets me know where the dial is pointing. And so if you want to make the interaction for the dial very easy, what we're trying to do is this. And the reason it's a little bit more complicated is that the idea is that when the player is touching the cylinder, we want this cylinder kind of look at the player's hand. The only issue is if the player's hand is a little offset, the dial might do something kind of like that. So in an effort to avoid that, we make a few adjustments. So I'm just going to create a script called dial HH for happy hour. Give that a go. Learn some interesting stuff here that you can implement for many other things besides dials, but that was a fun point of it. So what we're going to do is basically figure out the direction our dial needs to look at, and then figure out the look rotation required for this dial to face that direction, ignoring the Y component so that the dial doesn't look up or down. And you can definitely mess with this for different angles, but the principle is relatively the same. Okay, so let's create for now a public transform, and this will be our target. So this would be our hand, for example. And let's, okay, we won't worry about the rest for now. This should be good enough. In our update function, what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, let's figure out the direction we need to look. So let's just say dir, and that equals underscore target dot position minus transform dot position. Now, whenever you're using vectors, subtracting one position from another basically gives you an arrow pointing from the object that is minusing to the original object here. So what does that mean? So let's say we have our target here and our original object here. So if we use a vector 3 calculation to figure out t minus o here, what you end up doing is you end up figuring out a vector. You get a vector that points from o to t is the idea. Now, the positioning point for this vector obviously is irrelevant, right? Because it's always going from an origin point, essentially. But that's what this results in. The coding in Unity is what kills me. Well, I'm glad you're coming to these. There is a intro C# course for Unity 0 that is definitely worth checking out. It's taught by our resident Unity certified instructor / PhD in software development and some other masters or something in teaching, who leads that C# course. So definitely worth checking that out. If you get the 10-week course, you get a bundle with that. So that's always a good time. Very popular course recently, though, for sure. All right, so in our update loop, we basically figure out the direction something is pointing in, and then we say something like, you can also start here at 0. Okay, thank you, Dayon, for that. Or no, not Dayon. Who's typing that? That's my account. No, that's okay. Just kidding. All right. So we figure out the direction we need to look at. Then we need to figure out what rotation that is. So rot equals quaternion dot look rotation of that vector. And we want our dial to rotate about its y-axis, so it's only rotating this way. So that would be vector 3 dot up. However, I would recommend using transform dot up because your dial may not be perfectly sideways. Now, this figures out, or maybe diagonal at some point or sideways or something instead of always facing upward. So try and take that into account. Now, our calculations for dir, let's imagine instead of our dial being perfectly this way, and then our hand is always touching it perfectly on the side, wherever, and so the dial can perfectly face where the person's hand is. The player, instead of touching it like this, perhaps they end up touching it kind of like this. The direction is actually this way. And so now the dial, when it's looking at the player, which is here, the dial ends up turning sideways, which totally ruins the dial. So before we calculate the look rotation, we may want to do something like dir.y equals 0. Right? This way we can ignore the y part of a function, of a calculation. Dick, you're evil twin. Hey, Dick, how are you doing? Ozzy mentioned that. Yeah, that's the one. So we figure out the rotation value for an object, and now we can just say transform dot rotation equals rot. right? So that's it. This is us figuring out how to make an object look at another object, but ignore the Y position of the player. So just kind of look at the player, kind of like this. Let's see that in action. Switch over to Unity. The cylinder, as you can see, the blue arrow is what it considers forward. If I was to slap this script on it and lets me create another object, let's say this thing, let's imagine that that is the player. The player was touching it or not. Not worry about the trigger events for now. We slap the sphere into that public variable, that is the target. If I hit play now, let me split the game view to the side a little bit so I can see this in action. We'll see in the update loop what's going on here. Give that a second to play. Zero says, "Thank you. I'm studying product design, industrial design, and I think AR/VR will be great for prototyping." Heck yes, it will. My Unity crashed there, so that's always a good time. I'll load that up again here momentarily. So, industrial design. Oh man, that is a fun time. Yeah, love the demo, of course. I thought I saved my scene, but I may have been playing with fire. So we'll see. We'll see. Okay, let's go to XR happy hour. I did not save my scene. Oh, rough. I usually save constantly, but I spiffed that time. I'm just going to create a new scene file here. Page, let's call that this one. Go into that scene file there. Once that loads, there we go. So once again, created a cube for the base of my dial. Make that a little bit smaller for sure, something like that. Create a cylinder for my dial. A bit smaller like that. Something of that nature. And we'll bring that down, something like that. I'm going to reapply these materials. Black will be black and red for red. There we go. Oh, didn't mean to make it more metallic. And on the cylinder, I will create another cube. Let's shrink this vertically like that. There we go. Make that red as well. Save my scene here. And I will slap that script onto this now. I'm going to create a target for this thing to look at, like so. This would be the player's hand, ideally. The cylinder got the dial script on it, just needs a target. I'm going to drag and drop the sphere, which is kind of like the player. Play here, let's test this out. There we go. So as you can see, the dial kind of faces the direction of the player there and ignores the Y component. So if I go like this, it's really only caring about the side I'm facing, or it only cares about the horizontal plane, right? Something like this, and there we go. So perfect. That looks great. And one of the things we could do is, we don't want it to constantly follow the player. We would create some sort of effect that's like, okay, if the only time this does something is if you're touching the dial, then only will it do that. And you can add features like that by using something like an onTriggerEnter function. So let's say the sphere, I give it a rigid body so that it has some physics, and I'll make it kinematic so it doesn't fall down. Now, the reason I added a rigid body to this is there's this function, like I was saying, on trigger enter, on trigger stay, on trigger exit. There's also collisions as well. But the on trigger enter function, for these to work, one of the two objects needs to have a rigid body. So we can't use that on trigger enter thing without it. So we got our dial going. It's looking properly. It's not awkwardly tilting. Let's take a look at making the cylinders collider into a trigger zone. I think let me just get that selected here. There we go. Go back into Unity. It's taking a second here. There we go. Okay. So this cylinder, I'm going to use an on trigger enter function for this. And because of that, I'll need to take this cylinder's collider, capsule collider, and make it into a trigger. And the sphere, I've added a rigid body that's kinematic so that it doesn't fall because of gravity or something. And I'm going to tag it, instead of untagged, tag it as player. So we can identify the kind of things that touch the cylinder. That's the purpose of this on trigger enter function. So in our update function, we are constantly saying, figure out the direction you need to look and set your direction to that thing. Well, we could potentially move this into an on-trigger stay function, but on-trigger stay function is only run about 6 times a second. The update loop is going to run every frame. So 90 times a second, roughly 90 times a second, unless your application is very slow. Anyways, we've got our update set up. Let's get rid of the start function. Let's create a void on trigger enter function. A void on trigger enter, we're going to check to see if the thing that has entered our trigger zone is tagged as player. Kind of like this. And if it is tagged as player, that's what we want to say, okay, if a player is touching us, entered our trigger zone, then start doing this thing. And if the player leaves, so we have a void on trigger exit function, if other.tag equals player leaves, stop doing this. So this kind of logic you would implement by using a Boolean flag or something like that. So what I'm going to do is at the top, I'm going to create another variable, this time public. Well, it doesn't need to be public. Go with a private bool. I'll call this is tracking, let's say. Is tracking the player's hand or whatnot. Or yeah, that's good enough. Okay, so for those of you who are new, distinction, private, public. Public means that this variable can be accessed from other scripts. I can go to another script and reference this function's m_target variable. If it's public in Unity, I can also see it in the inspector, which makes it really easy for me. If it's private, it doesn't show up in the inspector and it can't be accessed from other scripts. But you can kind of override some of those things by, for example, if it's public, but I don't want to see it in the inspector, I can add like an attribute, it's called, to that variable so it's hidden. If I want to see a private variable in the inspector, I can serialize field. That will show me in Unity's inspector. Those kinds of things. Okay, so those two are set up. If other.tag equals player, what we're going to say is okay, m is tracking is equal to true. A Boolean, that's really all it is. It's just stores a true or false value, like so. And what I'm going to do in my update loop, this code that rotates my dial, it's going to be encapsulated in an if statement that checks to see if is tracking is true. Right? This is us creating a if statement. If m_is tracking is true, then do whatever's in these curly brackets, which would be me just moving this stuff up into here. Let me move that up. There we go. So I've encapsulated this stuff in here. And so if is tracking is true, do this code that we wrote for tracking the players in. And a shortcut for checking if something's true, you can just say, if it is at all, basically. There you go. So that's us checking it on trigger enter, on trigger exit. If the player touches and leaves, that's when we determine whether or not the tracking should occur. So with that update to our code, whenever you make changes to your code and save it, Unity, once you reactivate Unity, it takes a second to load those changes. So let's see now our cylinder. I hit play. You'll notice that it is no longer tracking the player's hand. As soon as, oh man, my Unity is crashing a lot today. What is going on? I think the streaming is taking a toll on my application here. I'm gonna just close some stuff here. Let me quit Discord, quit Steam, and close my many Chrome browsers. There we go. Hopefully that takes less of a toll on my computer now. There we go. That's looking better already. But yeah, so that is supposed to demonstrate essentially only rotate the dial when the player is touching the actual dial. So there we go. Let me go back to our scene that we were working on. It's always trickier when I get before you in here. Oh, which one was it? There we go. Do you have any good way of limits so that you can only rotate, say, 180 degrees? Can you clamp a quaternion? Ooh, that's a good question. Good question. You would check. Okay, well, it depends because your rotations would. Well, for my dial, I would do it a different way, but when it comes to a negative to positive rotation, it's a little tricky, but you could just strictly limit how much its Y rotation can go. So similar to a clamping feature. I'll show that next, actually. We can do that next. Let me quickly demo this XR scene and we'll get into that. So let's say we are here. I'm going to hit play. And won't crash on me this time, I'm sure. There we go. So it's not following around, not doing anything. But when I'm touching it, I'm just making sure that this thing is tagged as player, my sphere. It is not tagged as player. Did not save those changes, I guess. Player, cylinder is fine. This sphere needs that rigid body as well. It's to be kinematic. Cylinder's collider, capsule collider, needs to be a trigger so that the on trigger enter functions work. And so it's not following now. Go. Sphere collider, tagged as player. Rigid body is kinematic. This cylinder has the script. Capsule collider is a trigger. Should be working. Oh, it's unpaused now. Yeah, so I got to unpause it now. There we go. So as you can see, it is rotating only when the trigger zone is entered. But an issue arises. If I touch it from a different angle, it snaps to look at me instead of staying the direction it needs to be. So one of the techniques you can do is typically you'd have an empty game object as a parent of this thing. And that empty game object has the actual cylinder on it. But just for demonstration purposes, I'll just say this cube is unparented for a moment. This would be the easiest way of doing it, would be that, we have a reference to the child object. So Just make it public for a sec. Transform m underscore child. And on the trigger enter, what we end up doing is we say m underscore child dot parent equals null. So we no longer have that. For now, it'll be just a tick, but the update function is going to run. M underscore is tracking is going to be the limiter here. And then what we can do is wait for this transform rotation function to finish. So essentially we say, okay, that tick, no longer a child once the player touches it. Once the player has touched it, we're going to make the cylinder look at the player, or typically the empty game object. And then after you've done that, after the rotation has been set, you then check if the child's dot parent equals null. And if that is the case, you then set the child dot parent to this transform, right? Something like that. You can approach these situations in this manner. Relatively rough the way I've done it, but it's the idea. Okay. So with those changes to the script, we can take a look once again. So I've got my cylinder, made it into a trigger. It needs a reference to its child object. So let's just go with the cube. Again, you'd want an empty game object that has the collider, and then the whole cylinder would be unparented. It's not a big deal though. This sphere is needing a rigid body. That's kinematic. And it is tagged as player. We are good to go. Let's hit play. Let's try it out. Hopefully it doesn't crash on me again. But who knows? Okay, so there we go. We touch, it moves with us. And when we let go over here, it's going to quickly, as you can see, it's going to quickly let go of the parent-child relationship and then recreate the parent-child relationship after fixing the rotation. As you can see, and that completes the whole thing here. Huzzah. New grass. Hey, hey, Jacob, save. I will save now, yes. Constantly. All right, so limiting the rotation. Address that momentarily. We can show that. Excuse me. So one of the things you'd want to do is figure out the min and max rotation values. It's going to be a little trickier with this system here because now I'm picturing, you wanting to snap it between two rotations. So I would restructure this a little bit with that parent-child thing that I was talking about earlier. But essentially, pull us up here. The other question is, how do you set up a switch? Okay, let me address Newgrass's question right after this as well. Okay, I'm running low on time, so how's this? I'll show you some code for limiting rotation, Jonas. We'll go from there. So yeah, you would want to essentially clamp the rotation after figuring it out like this. So this rotation value here, you could do some sort of thing like but oh wait, not a quaternion. You'd want to use Euler angles actually. Yeah. Typically, you'd want to use Euler angles for that because you'd want it to appear as if it was in the inspector values. Let me see here. Yeah, trying to remember. So you figure out the rotation, but you'd want kind of the vector 3, let's just say rot E for Euler angles, and that would be equal to the transform dot Euler angles for the object. And vector 3, there we go. Figure out the Euler angles of the object, and you can say rot dot y is equal to mathf dot clamp, and you're clamping the value rot dot y between some minimum, so let's say negative 45, and some maximum, positive 45, something like that. So you figure out the current rotation values or Euler angles, and then you would figure out the y value again by clamping it between negative 45 and 5 and positive 45, and then you can reset the transforms at Euler angles to rot. That makes sense. Right? It's kind of how you would go about clamping the values. Quaternions, I don't recollect the last time I've tried to clamp the quaternion values, but if you're using a quaternion like this, you would probably want a mixture, and then you would, instead of Euler angles per se, you may want that parent-child relationship created and then use local Euler angles. But I would probably use a combination just to make it simple. Yeah, because otherwise you want to take the cross product of the quaternion, I think, to figure out the true axis in which you're rotating it around. Yeah, it's tricky. Yeah, transform dot up, actually, you'd want to do that. Anyways, I'm getting all over the place there. But yeah, quaternions are tricky. There are some great resources for those, though. So how do you set up a switch between teleportation and continuous movement in VR? I was thinking of using a prefab for each, containing the scripts and a setup script that would initialize the controller. So, okay, so switching between teleportation and continuous movement on the fly is very, very uncommon in VR apps. I can't recollect a time where those you would very quickly switch between the two, because typically a person would, be comfortable with one or the other, and there would be a menu to switch between the two. But you could, yeah, I don't see why not. You could have two scripts going on your controller at the same time and have a option that just disables one script, enables the other. How's it usually done? Well, it would be done with the two scripts that are active, and you enable one, disable one, because they're already in your scene. They have the references they need. Makes it fairly straightforward, simple. Any tips or suggestions regarding developing an XR game with leap motion interactivity? Leap motion, like the hand tracking for VR, if that's what you're referring to. Is that right? Leap motion. Are we thinking about the North Star, which had leap motion? I think leap motion is the hand tracking one. Any tips or suggestions regarding that? I see. Well, I believe with that one, you're able to save some gestures. I would just imagine being careful in the gestures you make. I think making the gestures should be very distinct from others, because I remember that when I was doing hand tracking, I had a gesture that was like this piece and like that. So it was VR, right? In particular. So it's a little tricky. So you definitely want to take a look at that. Yeah, usually you use X, the right joystick, to move around, both for teleportation and smooth movement, but not in the same time. Usually it's just a user preference, yeah, of your right-handed, yeah. Retry tomorrow. Okay, cool, new grass. Not sure, Rahul, if that answers your question, but regarding developing XR for leap motion interactivity. Trying to recollect. Is that the leap motion you're talking about, Rahul? The one that does hand tracking for a VR headset? It's like this device you clap on, or am I thinking of the wrong thing? Regress. I couldn't add the teleportation script because XR Toolkit allows only one movement script. Oh, you're using the XR Interaction Toolkit. I see. Allows only one movement script on an object. Okay. Well, you could have two objects, one active, one inactive. Two controllers kind of thing. Okay, great. Yeah, you can, instead of disabling the script, you can enable or disable an object. Two different objects. Two different controllers on the same time. Okay, well, I do have a one-on-one planned with our good friend Karthik. So I'm going to head out, everyone. Thank you all for coming. I look forward to seeing you guys again in the future, showing off some more stuff, maybe doing some more interesting exercises going forward, and maybe I'll do a deep dive into quaternions for Jonas. Have something prepared for that. All right, Dayon, in the house.
All right, well, goodbye. Thanks for
welcome,
coming,
guys.
everyone.
Take care, everyone.
Cheers.